Warning: this video contains mature content. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello Internet, Mike Bertolini here. I just want to thank you for watching this video and a reminder to like, subscribe, let YouTube know that you enjoy videos like this. So without further ado, on to the stories.
Halloween on Carpenter Drive. Steven, I noticed you haven't put out any Halloween decorations this year, said Eve, my nosy neighbor and head of our townhome association. I was in a rush and didn't want to get into it with her. Yes, I'm well aware, Eve. We're working on it, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. Thanks for the reminder, but I have to go. There are rules to living here, Steven. You'd best remember that, she said, her tone taking on a disconcerting edge. She swirled around and walked away, her steps eerily quiet. I started pulling out of my driveway, and as I glanced back, I noticed her standing right on the border of our yard, staring directly at me. I sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, my car's engine idling, waiting for the last few cars to pass by so I could leave. A jogger happened to run by. As he did, he yelled back at me, "Love the way you guys celebrate Halloween on your street. Everything looks so realistic." I grimaced. The last thing I wanted to hear was about how great everyone else's decorations were, putting more pressure on me to keep up. Work ran long. It was already dark by the time I arrived home. The primary sources of light came from two areas. First, a lamppost which had been decked out to flash red or orange, bathing the streets in a sinister glow. They're all draped in elaborate decorations, from nooses to alien signaling beacons. Second, a source of the dim light emanated from Eve's yard. She was still there, adding the finishing touches to her decorations. Satanic symbols, summoning circles, and a fountain of blood now adorned her yard. The eerie ambience became increasingly uneasy. I drew nearer and nearer and entered my home. "Honey," Eve called, "about the decorations." Luna, my wife, said as I walked in. "I'm working on it," I snapped back, my frustration evident. The last thing I needed was my wife joining Eve's incessant pestering about Halloween decorations. I knew the neighborhood standards for holiday decor. Luna raised an eyebrow at me, clearly sensing my stress. "Honey, we knew when we signed up for this when we moved here. I think we both agree the perks would have been worth it. Please appease her. You know what she'll do if we don't comply," she warned. I let out a heavy sigh, realizing my reaction had gone too far. "Yes, dear, I do," I said, softening my tone. "I will get it handled, I promise." After Luna went to bed, I finally had a moment to work on these decorations. I sat down at my computer and browsed for hours, but the selections were slim. Most of the good options were unavailable, and I cursed myself for procrastinating this long. Then I heard a knock at the door. I hesitated, my fingers frozen on the keyboard. Nobody ever visited us at this hour. I tiptoed to the front door and peered through the peephole, and opened it, revealing a familiar face in the neighborhood. It was Mr. Hollows, one of the neighbors, emerging from the inky darkness. He was clad in his tattered black coat, his face obscured by a twisted, grinning mask. He wasn't wearing a mask for Halloween. His was a permanent fixture, the result of a near-death experience years prior. "Evening, Stephen," he said, his voice a low, chilling murmur. "I've noticed you have yourself a dilemma." I swallowed hard, feeling his gaze weigh down at me. "Mr. Hollows, it's been a challenge to find the proper decorations." "Stephen, where's your Halloween spirit?" He took a step closer, and I couldn't help but retreat a pace. His voice remained low. "The Blair's yard is lit up like a carnival of horrors. What's holding you back?" My heart pounded in my chest, and I stuttered. "I'm still working on it, Mr. Hollows." His eyes, hidden behind the mask, poured into mine. "You know, Stephen, the spirits of Halloween demand their tribute. Without it, they might become unhappy." He extended a gloved hand, revealing a collection of crimson-stained fingers. "You wouldn't want that, would you?" Nervously, I shook his hand, the icy grip making me wince. "No, Mr. Hollows. I'll get right to it, I promise." His eyes seemed to gleam with unnatural fervor. "That's what I wanted to hear, Stephen. I do hope you'll find something befitting the occasion. After all, Halloween is a time for revelry, isn't it?" He turned and left, his footsteps fading into the darkened street. Feeling uneasy, I quickly purchased the best props available and had them set for 24-hour delivery. and I closed the blinds and went to bed, hoping that I wouldn't be having any more neighborly conversations for a while. The next day, after work, Luna and I began setting everything up in the yard. Our yard looked like it came straight from out of the French Revolution, complete with its own guillotine. But as I fumbled with a tangled mess of decorations, I felt a figure creep up close behind me. Suddenly, a raspy voice whispered, "Trying to catch up to the Blair, Stephen. Looks like you're still missing that special something." Startled, I turned to find Mrs. Stoker, an elderly neighbor notorious for her dark sense of humor. Her face was half concealed by a grotesque mask that appeared more like a genuine human skull than a Halloween costume. "I'm doing my best," I stammered, feeling the need to explain myself. Her skeletal fingers reached out, brushing against fake cobwebs I had set up. "You know, Stephen, it's not just about setting up decorations. It's about embracing the spirit of Halloween, about diving into the darkness." "I'm doing my best to get into the spirit, Miss Stoker," I assured her, trying to smile through my unease. She leaned in, her skull mask mere inches from my face. "Are you really, Stephen? Halloween is a time for indulgence, a time for crossing lines you never dare to cross in the light of day." I watched as she extended a gnarled hand, presenting an intricate antique dagger. "How far are you willing to go to please the spirit, Stephen?" My heart raced. I took a step back. "As far as I need, Miss Stoker." Her grinning laughter echoed through the night. "Good answer, Stephen. For now, you are safe. But remember, Halloween is a time for reckoning. Those who fail to appease the spirits may find themselves on the wrong side of darkness." With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, her footsteps fading along with her crackling laughter. Later that week, I found myself unable to sleep. Heading outside to the porch, I let the cool breeze blow against my face. That's when I heard it, a strange sound emanating from Eve's yard. It started as a faint melody, barely audible over the rustling leaves. The notes were dissonant and haunting, like a tune played backwards. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously approached the fence that separated our properties. Peering through a crack in the wooden panels, I was dumbfounded by what I saw. Eve, dressed in a dark hooded robe, stood at the center of her yard. She was surrounded by flickering candles that cast shadows on her face. Her voice was barely audible, a low, monotonous chant that sounded like gibberish. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, as though she were in a trance. The ground around her was covered in a series of strange symbols drawn in what looked like blood-red paint. These symbols seemed to come to life, their lines writhing like serpents, as if they were etched in flesh rather than soil. The air grew heavy with an unnatural presence, and the world seemed to warp and shift around Eve. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, as though nature itself were in awe of what was happening. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was witnessing something beyond my comprehension. I quickly retreated from the fence, my mind racing with fear and confusion. If I didn't get this figured out, I was a goner. Days went by, each one stretching my patience and fraying my nerves. The constant scrolling, the never-ending search, and the perpetual frustration gnawed at my sanity. This was maddening. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My life had become an endless loop of tormenting anticipation. Until finally, I found what I was looking for. A bead of sweat trickled down my forehead, leaning closer to the screen, my eyes locked on the revelation. "Honey!" I shouted, my voice tingled with excitement. "Come here!" I heard her start in the bedroom with her footsteps, heavy with sleep, approaching the office. "What is it?" she asked, her words muffled by a yawn. I pointed to the monitor in front of me, the cursor hovering over the screen. "Well, what do you think?" She squinted at the screen, her eyes tracing the lines and contours. Her sleepy expression slowly transformed into a smile. "Oh, he's flawless. A sacrifice that will put even the Blairs to shame. The perfect final decoration." The unanswered doorbell. The sound of the doorbell echoed through my empty house like a banshee's wail. It was Halloween night, and I was alone. Not by choice, but because it was my ex's turn to take our kids, Lily and Ben, trick-or-treating. The custody agreement was part of the divorce proceedings. Though I found it hard, I was getting used to the echoing silence of our once lively home. When the doorbell rang, I was hoping to see Lily and Ben at the door, their faces lit up with joy and their bags heavy with candy. Instead, I found an empty porch. Puzzled, I closed the door, thinking it was some kids playing a prank. The doorbell rang again. Rushing to answer it, expecting to see my children, I found nothing. Just a chilling October wind that seemed to whisper their names. This repeated throughout the night, the doorbell ringing, and each time there was no one there. By midnight, I was frustrated, frightened, and worried about my children. Their mother hadn't called, and they hadn't come by like they were supposed to. The worry nibbled at my sanity, and every ring of the doorbell twisted the knife of dread in my gut. The next day, the town was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The local news reported multiple cases of missing children from the night before. My heart skipped several beats as the newscaster read the names of the missing, but, to my relief, Lily and Ben weren't among them. Still, the relief was fleeting. I tried calling my ex and the kids, but was met with a voicemail each time. Panic gnawed at my insides, leaving me a hollow husk of a man. I decided to drive over to my ex's place, desperate to know where our children were. When I arrived, the house was eerily silent. There were no sounds of laughter, no television noise, no signs of life. The windows were dark, the front lawn strewn with Halloween decorations. I banged on the door, praying for an answer, but none came. I called out for my children, but my voice was swallowed up by ominous silence. A chilling realization started to creep up on me. Something was terribly wrong. I broke down the door. What I found inside froze the blood in my veins. The house was empty, eerily quiet, and there was a coldness to it that seemed to seep into my bones. My ex was nowhere to be found. The kids' rooms were untouched, their beds unslept in, as if they disappeared into thin air. Suddenly, I remembered the doorbell, the incessant ringing from the night before. A feeling of dread settled over me. Were my kids trying to reach me? Why couldn't I see them? Why were they now missing? The questions swirled in my head, intertwining with the fear and the crippling uncertainty. The silence of the house echoed the silence in my life without my children, and it was the most horrific thing I'd ever experienced. With trembling hands, I dialed the police, reporting my children and their mother missing. As I sat in the empty house, the dim lights from the settling sun cast long, menacing shadows. The doorbell rang again. But this time I was terrified to answer. My life had taken a horrifying turn. The doorbell, once a symbol of my children's happiness and innocence, had now turned into a monstrous, chilling sound that echoed the emptiness and terror of my life. Days turned into weeks. There was still no sign of Lily, Ben, or their mother. The police were at a loss. We'd searched the house, the surrounding areas, spoken to the neighbors, but all leads hit a dead end. Every night I returned to my empty home, the sounds deafening, the doorbell haunting me. The sound echoed in my dreams, morphing into a nightmarish symphony that jolted me awake in the early hours of the morning, drenched in cold sweat and shivering with fear. Townsfolk began whispering, pointing fingers. The words suspect and guilty started floating around. I was becoming a pariah in my own town. Missing children created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, and my own loss made me a prime target for their angst. But the real horror was inside me. The fear of not knowing where my children were was eating me alive, turning me into a hollow shell. Every knock, every ring made me jump. My heart pounded on my chest as if it were ready to burst. One night, while sitting in the dark, staring at old photos of Lily and Ben, the doorbell rang. It was late, well past midnight, and the sheer unexpectedness of the sound sent shivers down my spine. I approached the door, the dread heavy in my stomach. As I reached out for the doorbell, I felt an inexplicable chill. I opened the door, expecting the unusual emptiness, but instead I found a small plastic bag on the doorstep. Inside the bag were two things: a small, worn-out teddy bear that belonged to Lily, and a superhero mask that was Ben's favorite. Seeing their precious belongings, my heart sank. Tears stung my eyes as I clutched the items close, feeling a part of my soul shatter. The silence of the night seemed to mock my despair. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was living a parent's worst nightmare. The doorbell continued to ring intermittently through the night. Each ring was like a punch to the gut, a cruel reminder of my loss. I didn't know who or what was causing it, but the sound had become the soundtrack to my horror-filled existence. The following day, the police visited me. They found my ex's car abandoned on a rural road. There were no sign of her or the children, and no clues to their whereabouts. The disappearance of my children, The unexplained doorbell, the whispers of the town, and the unbearable sounds in my home. It was all a living nightmare. The worst part was the guilt, the gnawing thought that if only I had been there that Halloween night, my children might still be with me. I clung to the teddy bear and mask, the last remnants of my children. The objects seemed to radiate their absence, their laughter, their joy, their innocence. They were cruel reminders of the reality I was living. Every time the doorbell rang, I'd rush to answer, hoping against hope that I'd find Lily and Ben standing there. All I ever found was an empty porch and the cold, uncaring wind. The terror wasn't in monsters, ghosts, or ghouls. It was in the emptiness, the uncertainty, the cruel hope that the doorbell instilled in me every time it rang. The real horror was living every day without my children, in a world that had turned cold and frightening. And that was a horror no one should ever have to endure. So, my life became a terrifying tale of loss and fear, a horror story that unfolded with every ring of the doorbell. Town of the Tall Man. Another abandoned homestead passed by in the dead of night, the rotten buildings illuminated only by the lights of Garrus' beat-up Saturn. He counted it in his head as he continued down the endless, winding road through the rolling hills of the Dakotas. On the way, he passed a sign informing him he was entering the reservation. Once a welcoming sight, now felt as hollow as the decaying structures that had littered the roads and small towns up until then. He could already hear his father-in-law warning him to be careful when driving into the res at night. But that didn't matter anymore. At this point, the trip was a formality, a ritual. He knew the route, and he knew the better places to stop. He'd spend the night somewhere decent and finish his journey in the morning before returning back to what now passed as his home. His car forced itself uphill and through the steep curve of the cracked road, the engine gripping as if it were as tired as the journey as he was. Thankfully, Fort Ridge was not too far ahead. Another 15 minutes of driving in darkness and silence before he made his way past the faded homes on the outskirts. Garrus gave cursory glances to his surroundings, the few working street lamps illuminating the empty streets and closed buildings. The grill was closed for the night, and the bar lacked so much as one vehicle in front of it. Not a single person stirred, and even after rolling down the window, he didn't hear so much as a stray dog howling in the void. He sighed. Had it really been so long since he last came this way? Or was it always like this, and he had just never noticed? No matter. There wasn't anywhere to stay in the town itself. All his in-laws had moved to other towns or off the reservation altogether. He'd drive the extra few minutes to the casino and stop there for the night. The large looming block of a building revealed itself to him some turns later, the large sign proudly proclaiming its name next to where the town ended and the highway began again. The casino also looked oddly empty, but at least he saw some cars present and enough light to assuage any doubts he had. The casino's nearby gas station was also lit up, a practical mecca of illumination after the suffocating blackness he'd been coping with for the past several hours. He pulled into the station, stopping by the pumps before getting out to stretch his legs. Nothing but wind blowing across the prairie coupled with a hidden speaker belching out tiny music. He was about to fill up his car, but stopped at the sight of the touchscreen monstrosity that had replaced the original gas pump. What exactly had been wrong with the usual buttons and credit card slot that the casino had decided they needed to be extravagant? He was not dealing with this. Too tired, too drained, too empty, he walked to the front door of the gas station and went inside. The door chime chirped out as he stepped into the fluorescent haven of snacks and sodas. Everything stocked and tidy but the front desk unmanned. "Hello?" he called out, ruffling his unkempt blonde hair to scratch an itch. "Is anyone here? I need $20 on pump 1. No response. Garrus walked further into the store, letting the door shut behind him as he moved to look down the hallway towards the bathroom. "Not trying to rush you," he said. "I just don't want to have to deal with the touchscreen. Been a long night." Still nothing. Just the easy listening playing at its muted volume. "Never mind," he called out, turning around and going back out the door to the same chime. Perhaps if it was earlier in the day he would have been concerned, but this late at night he just wanted a hotel room with a bed he could throw himself onto. He moved up to the touchscreen, doing his best to figure out how it worked and what magic needed to be performed to get the gas flowing. A few minutes later, and $20, he sat and was ready for the trip tomorrow. He returned the nozzle to its holder and pulled himself into the car, the thought of the bed growing ever more prevalent in his mind. He started the car and moved away from the pump, spraying one more glance back. In the window he could see a shape, a dark figure hidden behind the glass of the gas station, features obscured as if seemed to be watching him. Perhaps the attendant was there after all, Gareth thought, too busy in the background as Brake or otherwise unwilling to help a customer with something they could eventually figure out on their own. He waved to the shape as he turned his car around and moved away from the gas station. When he looked back, the figure had vanished from the window. Gareth parked close to the entrance of the hotel side of the casino, pulling himself out with his duffel bag in tow. Countless stars lit up the night sky above him, but still he heard nothing beyond the constant wind racing across the landscape. The wind at night around this town had always unnerved him, but now it truly seemed as if it was trying to speak to him, catch his attention, lure him out into the wilderness to investigate an unusual noise. He forced the thought to the side and hauled himself into the hotel lobby, sighing at the sight of the empty desk before him. He walked up and looked around and down the nearby hallways, but not a soul could be seen. He rang the bell on the counter and waited, not a sound from anywhere around him. It had been a while since he had stayed here, but he remembered there always being someone at the desk and usually some sort of activity. He raised a hand to his chin. Perhaps someone would be at the... He didn't want to go there, but he had to. He swallowed and forced himself down the hall to the right, making his way to the hotel bar. His skin crawled, being here again after so long. It didn't help that the bar, like everyone else, was devoid of anything living. What unfathomable set of circumstances would have a bar casino desolate, no matter what hour? "Hey, stranger," called a voice behind him, making him jump. He turned around to see a man sitting at a table nearby. Hadn't the table been empty a moment ago? How could he have missed the person? "Hello," he said. "You know where the staff are? No one at the front desk. I was hoping to check in." "The night auditor just stepped out," said the man, gesturing to the seat before him. "Come, join me for a bit. He'll be back soon." Gareth took the seat across from the man, placing his duffel bag on the floor as he took in his new companion. The indigenous man was certainly local, with a wizened appearance not unlike one of the elders he used to know. He had long black hair spilling down around his shoulders and gave him a massive gleaming smile. He wore a suit and hat, pressed clean and straight and giving off an air of refinement Gareth had not encountered in anyone for some time. What caught his attention most of all, though, was the man's stature. Gareth wasn't short, but the man towered above him, effortlessly breaking 6.5 feet. Despite his age, he seemed no less weaker for it, and even though the suit he could tell that the man had a fitness that would be the envy of those decades younger than him. Gareth almost felt himself shrinking before the man's gaze from the other side of the table. "Thank you for joining me," said the man in his almost methodical dialect. "I always enjoy talking to those passing through. Would you like something to drink?" He gestured with his lips to something in front of him, and Gareth's eyes fell on a shot glass containing a white, creamy liquor. Gareth knew it well. It was Ibet's favorite. He kept a bottle of it in the kitchen fridge and in the spare fridge in the garage. He had used it to unwind after long days at work, on the weekends when he had time to himself. It had been there for him when nothing else was. He hadn't tasted it in a year. "I don't drink," he said. "My mistake," said the man. "Hope you don't mind." He took Gareth's shot as well as the one for himself and downed both. "Can't let it go to waste." He extended a hand. "Call me Mr. Blackwater." "Gareth," he replied, shaking the man's clammy hand. "Why is there no one here?" "This town's been in an odd state for a while," said Blackwater, releasing his tight grip and reclining. "Tough times. Casino's not doing as well as it used to. More stores are closing. It's all weighing on everyone, even more." He grinned. "But so long as my town stands, I have a plan." "Your town?" asked Gareth. "You in the council?" Blackwater chuckled. "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'm not for politics. I'm an entrepreneur, and soon this town will be spearheading something that will take the Midwest and beyond by storm." He reached into his coat and pulled out something from inside, its form and its clothing somehow hidden from Gareth's view. He handed it to Gareth, who found himself looking at a long can. Grape-flavored concoction courtesy of Blackwater Beverages. "Energy drinks?" Gareth asked. "All the rage," said Blackwater. "College kids cramming for exams, office workers pulling all-nighters. Everyone will be drinking these. I have a natural recipe that makes the big brands taste like nothing but sugar and chemicals, and I can sell these cheaper." He waved a hand at him. "Take it. We got plenty more. One of those will get you where you need to go. Hopefully not far. Grasped the can but didn't open it. Far too late to even be trying it, as appealing as it looked. Thank you so much, he said. Thankfully, I don't have much further to go. Just going up north past St. Colby's. Blackwater's smile faded. I see, he said. Well, hopefully it helps you get through the day. He got up from his chair and took his hat. I'll be going. Tonight's the start of something big around here. I can feel it as surely as I do my own time coming. You want to stay in here? I just come here for the travelers, said Blackwater. You have a good night, Gareth Lalamont. Without another word, he turned around and walked off, whistling to himself as he made his way into the lobby. Gareth shuddered. A man who would whistle at night on a reservation either had no fear or was the one to be feared. Then it hit him. Wait, Gareth said, getting up from his seat to pursue the man. I didn't tell you my last name. He burst into the bar in the lobby, but it was as empty as when he had first come in. He looked around, but the man was nowhere to be seen. Gareth eyed the energy drink in his hand and stuffed it into his coat pocket before returning to the bar to grab his duffel bag, abandoned by the table. He spared another glance for the shot glass left there, tiny dregs of the liquor still left in them. Part of him hadn't felt it in a year, stirred, aching, and pining. Never mind staying the night here. He had gas. He'd just drive the west of the distance, pick someplace secluded and sleep in the car. At this point, he'd rather take his chances out in the middle of nowhere than spend one more minute in this town. At least in the rolling fields, he wouldn't have this temptation within walking distance. He moved back into the lobby and stopped. A figure stood just inside the doors. He was a young man, early 20s, dressed in the uniform of one of the casino's gas station attendants. He was hunched over, arms and legs spread out as he was trying to maintain his balance, swaying and lurching as he moved into the lobby. Gareth clung to the strap of his duffel bag, eyes locked into the young man, threw himself closer one step at a time. The young man seized, then gagged, a stream of black, viscous liquid flowing, erupting from his mouth onto the floor in front of him. Gareth yelped and jumped back, bumping up against the counter as he continued to stare at what was unfolding in front of him. The man somehow found to spew out of him more, pulling his head back up and gazing at Gareth. The same black fluid blanketed the man's face in glistening, oily strings, coming from his eyes, down his nose, out the corners of his mouth. The stench of the rank fluid stung Gareth's nose like a mixture of bile and rotting corpses someone had utterly failed to clean up using hospital disinfectants. Ow, the man heaved, hands shooting before him as he launched himself at Gareth. He fell back, pinned between the counter and the assailant, as the man clawed at his coat and skin, raking at him with his nails before Gareth got his hands between them and pushed him away. The lunatic stumbled and fell like a rag doll, lurching and jerking as he tried to get himself back on his feet. All while more of that rank fluid leaked from him like a sleeve. The man roared, screaming, blanketing his face as he stared at Gareth, his eyes as black as the sticky liquid that now covered the lobby. He got on his hands and knees, but didn't bother getting up, instead launching across the floor at Gareth, slipping his own expelled bile but still keeping himself aimed at his target. Gareth yelled as he brought his duffel bag down the lunatic, knocking him flat before kicking him in the stomach, shoving him a few feet away. The man lay on his side, covered in black grime, gasping and panting like a dog, eyes still black as night. He raised his hands to look at Gareth. Ow! He choked out, spitting up more of that noxious liquid. He got onto his stomach, crawling at Gareth, but now so weak he could barely manage a few inches at a time. Gareth stepped back, running his duffel bag. Stay back, he yelled. Is there a single person in this place? Someone come quick! A loud crash overwhelmed the gurgling noise of the assailant, and down the hall he could see someone emerging into sight. Then another cry as the door flew open by the bar, accompanied by an unwanted but familiar cry. Ayel! Ali! The figure down the hall took off like a bullet, barreling towards Gareth while someone else crashed through the tables in the bar. Gareth darted away, barely keeping his feet out of reach of the first attacker on the ground. He pushed open the casino doors and looked at his car, but flinched back. He saw a fourth one coming of those afflicted locals, this one shoving a kitchen knife into one of the car's rear tires. Us, Ali! Cried out the vandal, forcing himself into her feet and falling back onto his car. She spat out her own stream of the black bile, coating her casual clothes in long hair and filth. She looked into him like a starving person, the last piece of bread, and lurched after him with no regard for every scrape, fall, and collision it took to close the distance. He ran off, gulping as he had to abandon his only known ride out of the town. He racked his brain for possible escapes, working vehicles, but of those who owned them he could recall living in this town. They all had moved out in the past year. More cries rang out from buildings as he passed them, shuttered shops and run-down homes with crooked, erratic shapes floundering past the windows. He hurled himself past the pitch-black post office, finally spying the still shape of IHS emergency room and a cluster of bile-covered madmen stumbling about nearby. He darted into the alleyway that went around behind it, getting into cover before finally falling against the wall, gasping for air as the world around him felt like ice. Before he had a chance to calm himself, though, he heard something vomit nearby. He covered his mouth, trying to stomach the decaying stench that seemed to cling more to the town by the minute. At the front of the alleyway stood another one of the lunatics, barely into his thirties from what he could tell. So plastered with whatever that fluid was, Gareth couldn't even tell what he'd been wearing. The lurker shot his head around, face pulled back as if he looked for his own lost child, hyperventilating in the cold night. Gareth opened his coat, pulling out the energy drink given to him by Mr. Blackwater. He was still hidden by the darkness of the alleyway, but if he could draw the man's attention with a distraction, it might keep them off his trail, at least for a bit. He threw the can out of the alleyway, landed on the road nearby and exploding. Sizzling dark liquid sprayed everywhere, and the afflicted's head shot toward the noise, fixing on it like a cat on a mouse. Jumped forward, landing face first in the surgery concoction, lifting his scraped and bleeding face up enough to let him lick at the ground. A stampede erupted from the other end of the clinic as the mob that had been by the front doors came down the puddle of the energy drink, each scrambling in a desperate race for every drop. Gareth took the opportunity to move himself deeper into the alleyway rather than risk even one of them spying him if he made a dash for the front door. By the time the madman had finished with the puddle, leaving the one unfortunate enough to be there, first broken and ripped apart, he vanished around the side of the building. Gareth shuddered as he walked back to where he remembered the back door being. Memories flooded back. Him waiting in the alley by the back doors, something hidden in his pocket. She came out the back, still dressed in her work uniform. He took her hand and led her to his car. He had a surprise dinner for her at the local bar and grill where they had gone on their first date. He remembered the last time he saw her wearing that ring. He shook his head, forced the thoughts away and focusing on the horrors he could now hear all around him. They still took up the night air, not so much as a cricket making noise alongside them. The repeated gargles, each forced out as if it were a matter of life and death. What was the disgusting fluid pouring out of them from wherever it could? And how had an energy drink just saved his life? What did you give me, Blackwater? He muttered out loud. A shiver went up his spine, and despite the alleyway being empty, it felt like something was filling in around him. Any longer out here, and he'd lose his cool again. He got to the back door, locked. He tried it a couple more times, but it wouldn't budge. No windows near him, but the noise of breaking one would possibly attract the afflicted. The alleyway led to somewhere it connected to some houses, but all too likely those now held like people prowling the streets with a greater tenacity than any of the stray dogs ever had. He sighed, stepping away from the door. For all he knew, the clinic was also overrun. He tried his cell phone, but no service. The power poles were still up. If he could get it in somewhere, maybe he could get out a call while waiting for morning. He stopped himself there. Calling wouldn't help. The emergency services couldn't possibly be working, and he didn't have anyone he knew he could call that would answer. He lifted the door again, and off to the side he could see a glowing red dot just below the roof. The clinic must have finally installed a security camera. He walked up to where it seemed to be pointing, and waved his arms. "Hey," he said loud as he dared. "Is there anyone inside? I'm not afflicted. I just need a place to hide." He waited, looking up at the red dot. Nothing. Then the red dot moved to the left. Another dot appeared and moved in tandem with the first before both angled down, and Gareth shrank back as something made of the shadow step forward, its glowing eyes the only light that its form didn't absorb. It was as if the entity was a void, a gap where the world had been torn out with nothing left. It towered over him, closing the distance in a single stride before reaching forward with a hand black as pitch. Gareth yelped and darted away before the shadow could grab him. running down the alleyway. He made it to the intersection just as he was standing at the end of the path back into the street like he had been waiting for him. He dashed down the other path, but it wasn't long before the shadow stepped out of another patch of darkness to block his way. He turned back, but it was there as well, just as far away as it had been in the other part of the alley. He looked down the third path at the intersection, then the fourth, but the shadow beat him there every time, ambling toward him as if it was out for a nightly stroll. His eyes landed on the back door of the closest house. He charged up to it and tried the knob. Locked. He tried again and again. The shadow was just behind him. It was too late to break a window, and would just follow him in. He tried in vain as the shadow reached his hand out to him, Tom going for his shoulder. The door clicked unlocked and he barged in, nearly barreling over a young teen who shut it the moment he was inside, turning the deadbolt. Gareth's momentum carried him off his feet and onto the floor, where he gasped for air before getting his legs under him. You picked the wrong time to have the car troubles in, Wasitu, said the teen, looking down at him while holding a tire iron. The young man looked to barely be in high school, eyes wide with heavy circles under them. Thank you so much, Gareth wheezed as he stood up. What on earth is happening? What was that? Grandpa can explain it better, said the teen. He gestured to the doorway leading out the kitchen. Gareth followed past the hanging blanket, entering a Spartan living room with several children lying about, stirring from their slumber on the floor to regard the stranger now in their home. Candles burned on the shelves and end tables throughout the room. The windows were boarded up with every last bit of scrap wood that could be spared, hiding the sight of the outside world. The strong smell of incense hung in the air. Gareth recognized the scent of sage. Grandpa, said the teen, talking to an old man Gareth just now saw in the long chair in the corner of the room. This one nearly got grabbed by him. The old man got up, regarding Gareth before raising an eyebrow. Haven't seen you here in some time, Gareth. Not for a year, Shane, said Gareth, hanging his head. He spent more than a few hours passing the time talking to Shane while waiting behind the clinic. Shane nodded, scooping up a bowl with a bunch of sage from the end table and pulling out a lighter. His grandson lit the sage so he couldn't waft the smokes onto Gareth. You're safe here, he said. The thralls don't come close to the house. Thralls? Asked Gareth. What happened here? What was that thing? A Wanagi, said Shane. Bad spirit. Poison that seeped into this town like so many others. But he's older than the town. I don't know when he first started appearing, but now this town is his. When? Asked Gareth. Fort Ridge wasn't like that when I was here before. At least not at first. His work has been slow, deceptive, but he does need to be careful now. He looked at the children trying to fall back asleep around him as his grandson went about trying to comfort them. He took their parents. I and the others left to take in who we can. We can't escape. He made sure of that. Who is he? Asked Gareth. Of course, part of them already knew. I will not speak his name, said Shane. He looked at him again. And I think you already know the one he is using now. I saw him at the casino, said Gareth. That seeing us, that was him as well? He likes to think of himself as an elder, growled Shane. But he's anything but. I'm glad he spared you, but I can't imagine why he did. Because he and I are old friends, came a voice from behind them. Everyone jumped and some of the children shrieked before quieting themselves, and Gareth and Shane backed into the center, arms spread wide as if to protect those around him. Out of the darkness of the hall stepped the same Blackwater Gareth had met at the casino, the shadows coalescing into the formal shape he had taken there. His glowing red eyes turned black like cooling coals save when the light caught them. Blackwater made a show of bowling into them all. Such harsh words about my work. It's not been easy. Leave this place, growled Shane. I will not let you hurt these children. He stepped forward but stayed within the living room, not daring to step into the hall when Blackwater loomed. Foolish one, said Blackwater, shaking his head. You know I don't want to harm them. They've all seen what you did to their parents, said Shane. What hope did their parents have? Asked Blackwater. The town crumbling, everything weighing on them, the loss of all they cherished, no relief in sight. I offered complacency. He extended his hand, and in between his long fingers was another candidate beverage he had been peddling. My latest balm for their wounds was relished by them, just as it will be by countless more. Though I do admit I prefer other drinks. He looked at Gareth, grinning. This one knows well how much they can help. I don't know you, said Gareth. Yeah, he did. I was there for you when you needed me 1 year ago, said Blackwater. I helped take the pain away from you. Sure, why needed the pain taken away, yelled Gareth. Memories kept assaulting him. Being shaken as morning light came in, meeting with all those people, looking at those he had called family and seeing disgust and shame in their faces. And that pain is still there, said Blackwater. This will help curb it. You won't break the promise that you made. You aren't welcome here, Wanagi. Leave now. You know, young one, said to Shane. I know the children here want to see their parents again. I could make that happen. They're all so thankful to me. They have to be. And I don't think a little sage will make them think twice about coming in. Gareth heard the voices of the thralls in his head. The garbled, slurred words that had spilled out of their mouths like the streams of black bile. I need help. Help me. You must help me. Don't, Blackwater, said Gareth, stepping out of Shane. What do you even want? It's what you want I'm interested in, said Blackwater, grinning away at him. You want closure. You want peace. You want the guilt to go away. He extended his other hand, and Gareth found his rising to meet it. He struggled to move, fighting against the urge, as if something inside him pushed against his flesh, forcing his arms up. Don't, Gareth. You know what he is. Everyone knows what I really am, said Blackwater, chuckling. Yet still so many willingly come to the clutches of the tall man. His hand darted forward, grabbing Gareth like a bear trap, and everything turned black. Color came back to the world a second later, all the darkness falling away like a curtain. Gareth stood on top of a hill, left reeling from how he had appeared there. A small abandoned farmhouse stood off in the distance. St. Colby's cemetery, just visible past it. The stars gave barely enough light for him to see around him, and see the gravestones right before him on the hill. The same hill where he and Lynette had played so many times. The hill he had shared their first kiss on. The hill where they had celebrated his proposal. And the hill where he had buried her. That night, a year ago, he should have known. He had seen the holes in the crooks of her elbows, her withering away, rotting like the town she had cared so much about. The town he had agreed to move with her to, instead of staying in the city just past the borders of the reservation. Everything had been eating away at them those past few years. But while she found her escape with a needle, he had found it in a bottle. That time, something had been different. The doctors said it had been laced with something else, something she hadn't been prepared for. She had died in her dead mother's farmhouse, helpless, all while he had been passed out on the floor beside her. A year ago exactly. He looked at the gravestone before him, the light from the stars blocking out by the looming shape at his side. The tall man looked down at him. Red eyes flared in the grave as it raised one of its arms and placed its hand on his shoulder. Not the piercing grip of a ruthless predator, but the comforting gesture of a loved one. It's a beautiful place, said the tall man. Even now it is, said Gareth. How unfortunate she left my grasp, said the spirit. There is no comfort in death. Not for her. Not for her loved ones. Not for you. At least she's free from you, said Gareth. Even if it's in death, she's at peace. And you're still here, alone and miserable, said the tall man, hated by everyone who ever loved you, still stitching together the tattered remains of your life. He extended his other hand to Gareth. Taking my will again. I saw some of your spirit. I know how much you hurt. His free hand formed another one of the cans. There is more than one way to escape the pain. To give yourself to me freely. I'll help you where all of your doctors, family, friends, and elders failed. I take care of those in my land. Gareth looked up at the tall man and snarled, breaking away from the shadow's touch. I'm miserable, he said, but I'm also myself. I'm broken. I'm not owned by something else. I made a promise to Lynette that I would never let myself be consumed by anything like that again. Not alcohol, not drugs, and not your disgusting sludge. The tall man looked down at him, and Gareth flinched. Everything around the shadows grew cold, and he could almost feel his own life and will draining out of him just beholding its presence. He kept expecting the spirit to raise its arm and grip him, forcing the drink down his mouth until it burst like an overfilled water skin. Yet it didn't come. The tall man chuckled, his laugh making everything around him almost vibrate. "You're adorable, young one," he said. "What? Perhaps some other Wanagi might have forced itself upon you," said the tall man. "But I feel no need. Fight me if you wish. Give me a hard time. Maybe even try to pull me from those in the towns I have taken into my care. Do everything you can. For all my threats, I won't try to thwart you." "Why would you do that?" asked Gareth. The tall man chuckled, stepping back into the darkness past the hilltop. "Because no matter what you do, I will always be with you, and I will always bring you and everyone else who meets me back into my clutches." Red Eyes vanished into the night, and warmth returned to the hilltop. Gareth let out a breath he hadn't been aware he was holding, then turned to Lynette. He put his duffel bag on the ground, opening it up and pulling out some of the things he had brought: her favorite book, her favorite candy, her favorite juice drink. After everything that had happened, he would still have this day with her, even if he just sat watching the sunrise together. As he sat down, leaning against the gray stone, something flipped through the air and landed near him. He grabbed it by the edge and brought it closer. A flyer, a story that a convenience store would put in their windows to advertise products.
"Coming soon to a store near you. Blackwater Beverages. Primal Power. It will save you when nothing else can."
As Gareth held his drink, he looked off in the distance to where he knew the next town past Fort Ridge lay, and on the wind he thought he could hear a deep chuckling.
Thanks for watching. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.